Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me today for the third and last part of the book series on the survival paradox. I'm very excited about today's session, and we have an ambitious agenda for today, and we'll try to cover as much as we can. Today, we'll still touch some very common conditions and how the survival paradox is reflected in them. And then we'll go to how do we transform the survival paradox. So some of the topics I'm just going to touch on, but give you some unique gems that are not so clear in the book itself, or are not present or not detailed. And some of them are really contemplative points, that like a sentence for you to meditate on, to feel, to rest in, to absorb cellularly, and see what kind of insight you get from it. So I want to start, as I like very much, by connecting to the place where listening becomes contemplative, where listening becomes transformative, by connecting to our heart. So we can just take a deep breath and exhale. We inhale, we let the diaphragm come down. And we exhale, we let go of all our tension. This time when we inhale, we bring white light from the top of our head to every cell in the body. And we exhale, we let any tension, any holding, any contraction, any limitation, any trauma out as black, gray color like smoke. And as we let go, we feel a ball of white light in our heart. Now when we inhale, the diaphragm is still coming down, but we bring the white light to our heart. We are breathing to our heart. And when we exhale, the heart spreads the white light throughout our body, spreading the white light, spreading the nourishing blood, spreading the more harmonized electromagnetic field, and spreading our intention of love, compassion, and nourishment, till it fills every cell in our body and fills the space around us, and holds everyone in this session. We can bring our hands to our heart and connect with this quality. This quality of a warm heart, a nourishing heart. And we let go. So welcome again, everyone. And I'm glad for the opportunity to be here again and discuss with you the book. And I want to transition to the second part of the book and talk briefly, especially after spending decades working with the topic about cancer, as the ultimate survival response downfall. And the reason why I make this statement is because, as I mentioned already, our body is really a conglomerate of tens of trillions of cells with hundreds of thousands of reactions every second per cell. And all this amazing community works together from the point of view of this, from the selfish point of view of the cell that wants to do well, that wants to take what it wants and release what it doesn't want. And from the point of view of the cell understanding it's part of a community, it has a responsibility to the community. There is a mutual support between the self and the community, and between the community and the self. And as such, a cell is an expression of the community. It comes into existence, it serves its role, and it just dissipates away for the next cell to come up. And there is a basic understanding of this quality of the longevity of the whole community is us, in a bigger view, the oneness, which is bigger than us, all the way to the cell, who is a contributor to this. Cancer cell is a cell that starts experiencing a disruption and disconnection to the community. Like an undisciplined child, like an undisciplined individual in a community. It starts disobeying the rules. It starts focusing on its own survival at any cost, even at the cost of hurting others. And as such, it becomes independent of the system. It does it by creating isolation, by creating a boundary, a microenvironment, where the cell no longer responds to signals from the environment. It creates its own pathways, and then it starts in its journey, when it becomes more aggressive, to conquer the environment, to become stronger, to become dominant. And the more dominant it is, the more energy it needs, the more its metabolic rate goes up. And as a result of this, it changes its metabolic function, it changes its energetic pathways, it changes its behavior, it spreads everywhere, and it's really like a fire that burns a field, and once it burns everything, nothing exists anymore. The cell dies, the cancer dies together with the host. And this is why cancer is really the ultimate example of the survival paradox. The identification, the loss of the understanding that everything that expresses itself arises, has a certain time of expression and falls away. Instead, the cells want to survive. It doesn't accept the immortality. It doesn't accept the mortality, the changeability in everything. And as such, it actually causes on itself and on its community a death sentence. And that's really the power of the survival paradox. So what are the drivers of the survival response in cancer? And these drivers will give you a roadmap, a blueprint of what causes cancer and how we can change the outcome. So one part is genetic. We have a genetic tendency for certain cells at a certain area to become cancerous, to get dysregulated. So for example, we'll take the BRCA gene in breast cancer. People with the BRCA gene have a greater probability of developing breast cancer, aggressive breast cancer. But genetics are a very small percentage of cancers. Then we have the epigenetic factor. Epigenetic above the genetic. And epigenetic really determines the genetic expression, with which genes will express themselves as a result of lifestyle, behavior, trauma, life experiences, our own, others around us, our ancestors. So these lifestyle changes can drive the cancer, and changing the lifestyle changes can, one, prevent cancer, a little bit easier to do, but people don't always jump into it because they don't have something solid to hold to and to try to change. It also can attenuate the cancer itself, the pace of the cancer. You know, it's interesting, an unusual example. It's not unusual, but it's like we have 3 dogs, all our rescue dogs, but our older dog, Simba, is a very large dog. Usually they live 8 to 9 years. And 13 months ago, he had a severe bleed, and a very aggressive tumor exploded, hemangiosarcoma in his abdomen. I was out of the country, and our daughter drove him to the emergency room, and he had a 9-hour surgery. They saved him. He had some chemotherapy. But at this age with the cancer, usually the lifespan is 3 to 4 months. But he was put on a dynamic 2-week cycle supplement program, and lots of love. And he lives in a pack of other dogs that love him. And here we are 13 months later, and he is happy and going around. We don't know how long he has, but he really completely outlives the expectation. He transformed the survival response. In his case, it's through food, through supplement, through a supportive environment. So it's giving an example because I just gave him a big hug before I came down. So epigenetic really changes the phenotypic expression of the gene present. So for example, we can have a BRCA gene, and some women with BRCA gene will get cancer at the age 40. And some live a really healthy lifestyle and will get it at the age 70 or 80, and some will never get it because the lifestyle changes were so strong that they attenuated the expression of the BRCA gene, because the BRCA gene is not present in every cell. It's present at the mutation at a certain percentage of the cells. We know that certain supplements like DIM can reduce the expression of the BRCA mutation. This is in double-blind clinical trials. So really, the concept of genetic and epigenetic is really a fundamental concept and an ancient concept. You know, I sometimes quote an old ancient Hebrew saying that says, "Hakol tzafui v'hareshut netuna." Everything is predetermined. That's our genetics. And we have the choice, which is epigenetics. So really, the journey of transforming the survival paradox is really a choice we have. The survival paradox is present within us, and it's going to create havoc as part of its survival. So putting genetics and epigenetics aside, we want to look at different categories that can trigger the survival response. So the first category is toxins. And this is a big category in integrative medicine, big category in alternative medicine. And this is where comes certain people who had cancer and they either had a lot of toxins to begin with, or they had a lot of room for change, or their detox pathways were good enough that they could have really gotten rid of a lot of things, and they overcame cancer. And then often people follow in their footsteps, and some people get similar results, the majority don't. Because this is only one pathway, and it's not enough usually, but it's an important component, it's an essential component. And we start with looking at the chemical, materialistic toxins, heavy metals, if it's mercury, if it's arsenic, if it's cadmium, if it's radioactive material, if it's lead. We look at pesticides, which are so prevalent. And they have a direct toxicity, and they have the damage that they cause because they damage, for example, glyphosate will damage the gut lining, that will cause inflammation in the gut, that will make larger molecules penetrate into the bloodstream, that will then create an autoimmune response, will create an immune dysregulation and inflammation that will affect other areas, will damage the kidneys, will cause certain cancer. That's an indirect effect of toxins. We have mycotoxins. It can be carcinogenic, can be very toxin, and we have environmental toxins. Microplastic is a huge issue. Different byproducts of petroleum, byproducts of industries, etc. And the issue is that they don't come as one thing. It's a package, and we're all bombarded for it. And naturally, because we are bombarded with it, to survive, we develop systems to get rid of them that have to be more active than in the past, like 200 or 300 years ago. But as they become very active, they also go through a process of wear and tear. And they get exhausted. And that's the time when we take a break. We reduce the input into the system by changing our diet, by fasting, by doing a more green, light diet, by giving a break through intermittent fasting, by doing good hydration, by taking different components. We give a break to the system. So the input of toxins go down. And now the body says, oh, there is less coming. I can start letting go. That's why detoxification protocols are so popular and so beneficial. We have the energetic effect that affects our chemistry and biology, different kind of radiation that we're exposed to, in a scale that is massive compared to what it was 100 years ago. Some people say up to 10 to the 15th power, one with 15 zeros, trillions and billions, trillions times billions times more, in different kind of radiation, ionizing radiation, EMF, computer radiation, more cosmic radiation from ozone issues, and the radiation of busyness, of electricity, a lot from different area. And into it affects the quality of our energetic field that is over there, the electromagnetic field of the heart, which is 100 times bigger than the electromagnetic field of the brain. So if we are bombarded and we are stressed and we have a lot of toxins and there is no coherence, there is no harmony between the brain and the heart, we don't function as one system, this disharmony is now radiating non-stop to every cell in our body and radiates outwardly. And the field of the electromagnetic field is not 5 feet or 10 feet, and now they have measurement that can measure farther away. It's endless. The fact that we can't measure it because it fades away doesn't mean it stopped existing. So within all of this, we also have the ability to transform it by cleaning from the chemical toxins, by cleaning energetically, and by cleaning our intentions, transforming our intention. So one of the ways where energetics affect, energetic is really the expression, is through our breath. So when we reconnect with the use of the diaphragm, so now we have better oxygen coming in. When we breathe with intention to our heart, and we create this coherence between the brain and the heart, better synchronicity, beat-to-beat variability improves. We become more flexible, right? When there's variability, the rubber band is flexible, it's not the same. All of these changes our well-being. And there is an emotional component where we have a dominant destructive emotion, let's say very strong anger, and the anger just explode. It creates heat, right? When we get angry, we can feel the blood rushing to the head. Well, it increases the blood pressure. It makes the blood flow in the blood vessels uneven. It creates turbulence. It creates endothelial damage that creates a reactive injury repair. It creates fibrosis with the diseases that relate to it. In this case, cardiovascular diseases, strokes, but also certain factors that enhance this, like lipoprotein A, will also drive cancer to be more aggressive. And we have a psychological, mental thought processes. So our energetically, our response to life that is triggered by all of this is really driven by stuckness in time, by grasping, by holding to the past, living in regret, in grief, projecting into the future with fear, anxiety, or holding to the present. Obsessiveness, compulsiveness. So this holding and identification with certain times and not being able to flow through time and just always flow, including not holding to the present, is affected by our intention, by our thinking mind, by our conceptual mind, which is driven as part of the survival by watching and by grasping. We hold to external sensation, and we either push them away or we want more of them. That's the basic polarity, the basic reactivity. And this reactivity that triggers very quickly, for example, the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system, is the innate and inherent origin of the survival response. So everything we say about blocking galectin-3 and we're moving this, and we're moving that. We are just attenuating the survival response. When we start melting the grasping, we are now melting the origin of the survival response to a place where we have a choice when to respond when there is a survival need, and when we can just stay relaxed and there is no need to trigger this response. And even this gets to unfold and develop through meditation processes, and I'll touch on it a little bit. So we talked so far, and this is just touching cancer briefly, and you can see the depth because each of these parts represent different therapies, right? So we talked about genetics, epigenetics, we talked about different level of toxins, and the other part is we have to address side effects of treatment. So we pick a treatment, and this category usually the main treatment, we pick Western treatment, where there is significant progress in the last 10, 15, 20 years at a significant cost. So we have the category of radiation therapy, chemotherapy, that has direct toxicity, cellular damage, DNA damage, inflammatory damage. And then we have another category that is very popular and is often addressed in a way that people think, oh, it's not as bad as chemotherapy, it's immunotherapy, but often with worse side effects. And this is new compound that unleash the immune response, remove the suppressive effects on the immune system that the cancer is causing, that the survival paradox is causing. And these are inflammation-producing immune dysregulators, checkpoint inhibitors. So the body has certain molecules, PD1 and PDL1, that are checkpoints. They put a check, they put a stop to the immune system. But there are too many of them, so the immune system doesn't respond, and we can't fight cancer. We block these checkpoints, we unleash a survival response. We unleash an immune cytokine storm. We unleash an immune response, and the fire can burn the cancer and can also burn the field. And this is one of the key issues with immunotherapy. And it's interesting because the survival response from the point of view of the cancer cell suppresses the ability of the body to fight the cancer cell. But when we unleash the survival response from the point of view of the body, we unleash inflammatory damage. So when, for example, when we block galectin-3 or when we are going to remove it dramatically with therapeutic apheresis, we're going to allow a better response and less inflammation. It's not a double-edged sword. That's the beauty of addressing an upstream cause and not something that is much lower. So when we look at treatment principles within all of this, so really I'm giving you a blueprint. You feel the parts. There are many, many treatments, many approaches, many supplements, many diets, many cleansings, etc. But I'm giving you the blueprint. This is not as easy to get. So the treatment principles are, we attack the cancer. We address, so basically we're attacking the group of cells that are not listening anymore. So we have to be ready to attack. We have to be strong enough, consistent enough, and be able to handle the downfall of inflammation. And we have to be ready mentally to do it. Then we address all the above causes, all the different levels of toxins, and you can see how many different therapies can be done in different sequences. And then we reinstate the state of harmony in community. And the timing and order of this are key. Key independently, and key when they are combined with a conventional treatment like radiation, hormonal therapy, chemotherapy, immunotherapy. And unfortunately, this is not recognized as much or taught as much. Usually, the view in conventional medicine in any naturopathic medicine is very linear. You look at a pathway, or you look at an herb, and you look at what can block a side effect. The dynamic energetic understanding is not as simple to really comprehend and internalize. And the result is a laundry list of therapies. It can still be helpful, but it requires more treatments because the fine-tuning is not present. The priorities are not present. So that's a little bit about cancer that took a little bit more than a little bit time. And I want to touch a little bit on neuroinflammation because it's very important in relation to the survival response. And this is a little bit of expansion on what is written in the book. So the survival result is a survival response results in inflammation in our largest border between the inside of the body and the outside. And the border is not our skin. The border is the gut of the lining of our gut, the different folds in our GI, in our digestive tract. It's much larger in surface than our skin. And there we decide what comes in and what goes out, similar to what's happening on the cell membrane. And when we have a disruption on a local level, that is very common because we get it with our food, we get it with our water, right? So we get pesticides, we get mold toxins, we get heavy metals. They disrupt the gut lining. They cause leaky gut. Right now, leaky gut is an acceptable medical condition. You would be scolded and laughed at if you brought it as a possibility 30, 40 years ago. I know it from my own experience. So it affects our boundary. It causes a leak in our boundary, which means things that are not supposed to get absorbed, get absorbed. Things that if they stay in the lumen, in the space, in the digestive system and come out through our stools, cause no damage to us, now are penetrating our body and creating a disharmonious immune response, an autoimmune response, an inflammatory response, and certain compounds have affinities to certain areas. And this kind of boundary disruption projects itself to the other major boundary in our body beyond the regular cellular boundary, which can also be damaged, of course, right? And we know certain autoimmune digestive-related diseases like ulcerative colitis and Crohn's have extra GI side effects. And the other place where there's a boundary is between our circulation and what comes into the brain, through the blood-brain barrier. And we get a leaky blood-brain barrier resulting in an immune response of the immune cells of the brain, the glia cells, the astrocytes, and this immune response creates chronic inflammation on an intense scale or low scale that drives different neuroinflammatory, neurodegenerative diseases based on the location and the causative factor. And this is really a systemic effect of the same pattern. And this is really not the topic of today. But so far we talked about a systemic effect that affects the brain like it affects other parts of the body. But the nervous system plays a more important role, a specific role to the nervous system. The nervous system is where our senses gives input all the time. What we see, what we hear, what we smell, what we feel, what we taste. The nervous system responds. Its role, keep us surviving, navigate our life, stop, look, analyze, discriminate. Oh my God, what Isaac is saying is so amazing. Oh my God, such nonsense. This doesn't make sense. This makes sense. I'm going to do this. I'm not going to do that. All the time it's working. And as such, it guides our survival response through our sympathetic system, right? Which is innate. It happened in a fraction of a second. And it has a scavenger quality. It creates a response through neurotransmitters, through hormonal-based stress responses, cortisol, glucagon, which are excreted in the body in response to a stimulus from the pituitary gland, from the hypothalamus, right? And then all of them coming through the midline and then going to the different glands. So the meaning of this is that we have a localized nervous system survival response. So if we look at the most endemic neurodegenerative, neuroinflammatory condition, that in our specific study group in the 90s, we identified already as what will be the epidemic of the 21st century, it's really memory loss and Alzheimer. So if you look at the Alzheimer plaque, it has 10 to 20 times the concentration of galectin-3. So is it just a byproduct, a coincidence, like amyloid plaques that are really not the cause of Alzheimer? Well, what is a nervous system? It's an amazing neuronal network. The human brain has, rounding the number, about 100 billion neurons, but over 100 trillion synaptic connection between the cells. There are different highways that bring energy, bring information from the cell out and take information from the environment into the cell. This supercomputer, okay? I mean, there are more neurons in a single human brain than stars in the Milky Way. So this network of synaptic connection is between 600 trillion, okay, to 2 quadrillion, okay? It's like not trillion, it's like 1,000 times trillion. It's really infinite numbers we can't really perceive. But when we're in a normal mode, when we feel safe, when we feel balanced, we are in a communicative state of the brain. We have a wide network. And one of the things that happens, and you can see it in meditation, we perceive things we never perceived before. You know, people meditate to say, wow, I became more perceptive. I'm seeing things I've never seen before. You were getting the input all the time. I was getting the input all the time. Our visual field was narrow, was constricted by our survival tendency. And now that it's relaxed, we see more. And that, by the way, for the meditators in the audience, the danger of what happens when you grasp to a meditation experience and you turn it into, wow, amazing, and this becomes your focus, you are eliminating the continued unfolding of the process. So the communicative brain is amazing. But when we go into a survival protective mode, the neuronal synaptic networks move to a protective role. It creates a microenvironment from a chemical, physiological, histological perspective, but really it narrows the network so it's easier to handle, and it moves into a hiding, into a communicative, into a protective role. And when we narrow our network, we narrow the ability to express and to conceive, and we start narrowing our mental cognitive function. It is really what's happening in Alzheimer's. So Alzheimer's, it's really a disease of the survival paradox. And we know that improvement of circulation, removal of mycotoxins, right? Reducing of stress, and meditation, exercise, balance, we can reverse Alzheimer's because we are moving from a protective mode to a communicative mode. And I just interviewed Dr. Dale Bredesen for a podcast I will be launching relatively soon called Open Heart Medicine. And Dr. Bredesen Dale is a neurologist from UCSF, and he's a founder and president of the Bucks Institute, the famous Bucks Institute in Northern California. He started it many years ago, and we were talking about Alzheimer's, and both of us, from different angles came to this protective communicative, which he introduced from a neurology point of view. I introduced from the survival paradox point of view. So I wanted a little bit to point out to this. So now we move to the third part of the book, to detoxification. And again, I warned you it's going to be congested today. So if we look at page 178 of the book, assume you have the book, we have a diagram about the phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification. Let me share with you. So if we look at this, we have two basic processes, the process of discharge and the process of elimination. So what is discharge? Discharge is making compounds that are fat soluble, that are not available to the circulation, packaging them through oxidation, reduction, hydrolysis, hydration, and dehalogenation, we make them into intermediary metabolites. Now we are dumping them into the bloodstream. We are bringing them into the awareness of our circulatory system. And then we have to eliminate them via urine, bile, stool, and we need all this reaction of sulfation and glucuronidation and using glutathione conjugation, acetylation, etc., and methylation. You all know so much about. So this is the basic process that there is so much talked about of discharge and elimination. But we want to look at it a little bit deeper. So really, we have the toxins that are not available for us. The toxins that are hidden, they are fat soluble. They're not accessible to the whole system. They are hidden. They are boxed. And they can be boxed in a fat soluble tissue. For example, heavy metals and pesticides in the fatty breast tissue, and we wake up one day with breast cancer. Or they can be boxed in fatty components in the bone marrow, or they can be boxed in an atherosclerotic plaque, or in a biofilm, or in a scar, in a fibrotic scar. And once we open them up, once we discharge them, we have to be able to eliminate them. And that's the relationship between phase 1 and phase 2. If there is too much emphasis on phase 1, it can flood the system. So really, once we break it open, our response to breaking it open, which is part of the detoxification process, is all the detox. All the detox treatments are handling the ability to eliminate what we discharge. And there is a dialogue between discharge and elimination. And in this sense, we need to support elimination. So on the physical level, how do we support elimination? By having good hydration, by breathing, breath work, so oxygen gets to the tissue, it gets less inflamed, it gets more blood supply, it's willing to let go more easily, right? By using binders that bind to different toxins, and there are many of them, by using different animals, for example. And there's a difference between more of herbal or green-based animals that are more oxygenating, like wheatgrass animals, help to normalize the cell, take care of the environment of the colon, and animals that help the contraction of the bile and the release from the liver that increases the discharge, but then we still have to eliminate. For example, coffee animals. So you can see the different animals will have different rules, and people will also use, people will use different methods for this process. We'll use colonics, etc. So the process of discharge, it's really bringing to our attention things that we were not aware of. It's really moving things from the unconscious, from the subconscious, and releasing them into our consciousness. And what we do with them when they come to our awareness, that's our life journey. That's our healing. We can hide them, we can suppress them, or we can try to address them. So detox is the basic fundamental step that we have to do all the time because we produce toxins all the time. And we especially have to do it, one, when we have a disease that is toxicity-based or produces a lot of toxins, or when we want to shift the balance towards a less toxic environment. And more often than not, if you look at most cancer therapies, you look, for example, at Gerson therapies and different cleansing therapies, most treatments stay right there at the detox level. Extreme diets, enemas every day, colonics, restricted diets, juicing, etc. Right? We restrict what we can take in, so it's very clean, very pure, and we let go of anything that we think is impure. And the more strict we are, the more fundamental we are, the more things are no longer acceptable to us. They become impure, right? For somebody with a very clean diet, God forbid they smell some gluten, they'll have a total crisis, right? Because their reality, their reality has really shrunk. So when we do this, as we narrow, for example, what we eat, what we digest, we're also narrowing our ability to digest our reality. And as a result, possibly we start narrowing the experience of our life and daily life, and the experience of our reality. And as we know, modern time helps us do it, right? If we have a certain very narrow point of view on life, comes social media, right? Which makes money by categorizing us into a certain groups and feeds us information that keeps us comfortable and encourage that what we do is right and get us averse to what is not what we believe in. That's grasping, right? Attachment and aversion, basic movement, and create this isolation and separation. And you can see it in the geopolitical level. You can see it permeating every level in our body. So another transformative side of detox is being able to tolerate. What was toxic is no longer toxic. On a physical level, and it can totally happen, it's tricky. As often we have a very ingrained biochemical immune responses. For example, if we developed antibodies already to a certain food that normally we should not have antibodies for because of leaky gut, every time we eat this food, we will have an immune reaction to this food, or to smells, or to radiation, or to different things. And we can have abnormal sensitivity to toxins that are not supposed to be toxic to the average person, that really, this is what allergy is. But a basic quality that underlines this is hypervigilance, is being on overly alert, which is really an overindulgence, a dialing up too high of the survival response. Everything becomes dangerous to us. In modern time, as we say, we become allergic to other people's opinion, to other belief systems. It can be ethnicity, gender bias, all are narrowing our tolerance. Some are conscious, and some we are not aware of. So when we discharge from the cells to the circulation, we are bringing awareness to these things. And our reaction to what arises in our mind, our reaction to the chemicals that come into our circulation, they are key to our transformative and healing. It's interesting for me because I am just from a very minor personal experience, but I travel a lot, and until the late 40s, early 50s, so about 15 years ago, I had very little jet lag. And then I started developing jet lag, more and more. And then it became an issue. Like when I went to Israel, I had to give myself 3-4 days. And when I came back, it was 4-5 days. And I just traveled to Israel in June, and there were no direct flights. So the 15 hours, forget about it, was 26 hours door to door. And I had no jet lag, even at night when I came, and I had no jet lag when I was here. It was very strange to me. And I realized something in the flexibility in my internalizing this understanding has allowed me to also be more flexible with time changes. So this is part of neuroplasticity, of existence plasticity, of becoming more flexible. And so that's just a small example that I realized, not like, oh my God, it's amazing, I had a terrible disease that went away. But it really points out a certain shift. So toxin can enhance this physiological process of hypervigilance, mycotoxins, pesticides, environmental toxins. So we got these toxins that were exposed, and then we put a label on them. We put a label that labels patients, human beings, as having a medical condition, and we have the doctors who specialize in this. So the new buzzword condition, two very basic things. I'm going to focus on one. I think I may touch the other one later on. If not, I apologize. Is MCA, muscle activation, right? We have our immune response is overactivated, right? Multiple chemical sensitivity, MCS. So it's a category. Everything becomes toxic to us, and we become reactive to this. So people who have it, or if you notice when you talk to these people, they already know they are going to react to modified citrospectin because they reacted to something similar 2 months ago or 5 years ago. They already have the anticipatory, the psychological, the mental, the existential allergic response. So of course they're going to be allergic to it because remember, the brain triggers the neurotransmitters, triggers the hormonal changes. That changes blood vessel permeability and immune response, etc., etc. So what is the prevalent solution? Let's say in MCA, you take this drug to suppress allergic reaction. You take H1 blockers and H2 blockers and Pepsid and muscle stabilizer just to suppress the immune response. Or you take a multiple antibiotics to clean the infection, to kill the infection that may cause the response. So these are suppressive drugs. They will work, but they seldom will work and really heal. They will work by narrowing the exposure, by narrowing our reality. So the change, the healing, has different levels. In Buddhism, we use the term body, speech, and mind. So on the level of the body, of the form and the speech, we behave differently and we talk differently. Very common, right? It's not, some people is impulsive their behavior, and the sympathetic system is so dominant because of genetic and epigenetic traumas. You see it often in epigenetic and familial tendencies. And in certain societies, when there's a lot of pressure on behaving properly, the lead is put on this until it explodes in a very different place. And we have the speech, right? But the real transformation is in how we think, in how we feel, in how we perceive differently. So forced behavior and speech out of tightness and not out of expansion are not a real solution. The classical thing, especially in California, is politically correct tendency, right? Politically correct, you can't say A, you can say only B. But it's not because it's politically correct. It's because it's simply correct. It's simply the right way to express ourselves. We don't have to talk in this way because it's politically correct. But if it comes from an intention, it doesn't have a suppressive energy anymore. It has a more inclusive, equality quality to it, very different. So when we start making the changes in the mind level that are a little bit more difficult, they will permeate the speech and the form. So the real change is in the mind level. And it has a whole approach in the meditative realm. So the fundamental shift where greater tolerance happens, it's between detox, that happens anyway. It's a foundational level. It can, just like we exhale and we inhale, we detox and we nourish. It's going to happen anyway. It's not going to stop. But the fundamental shift is from detox to transformation, from the liver to the heart. We move to open heart medicine. We move to acceptance. Everything becomes acceptable. And ultimately, on the deepest level, in its essence, nothing is toxic, even if the expression is toxic. The essence, the basis, is originally pure. And when we can identify it and live in this way, that's when miracles happen. But it's a journey. So in order to heal from this journey, we need to heal the imprints we have that are not allowing us to do this. And these are our scars of survival. And scars of survival are truly a topic of their own. I cannot believe I have 2 more chapters. I have just a few minutes. I may steal a few minutes. I apologize. If people have to leave, they have to leave. And so it's really a topic on its own. And one of the key drivers of scarring is trauma. And I gave a webinar on this in my May webinar, so I encourage you to go and take a look at it, and maybe we can send, when we send the replay, we can give a link to the trauma webinar in May. So the scars are in the level of body, of form, of biochemistry. The scar, like a cut, like a certain chemical. The scar are in the level of speech, of movement, and the scars are at the level of the mind. So physically, it's any toxin that creates stagnation, inflammation, and fibrosis. And physical scars from cuts, from surgery, from injury that creates actually keloids that creates a scar. It's tissue that is not fully alive, a tissue that is stuck. It's stuck at the time of the injury. It stays the same while we move on. It's something that belongs to our past, that is not part of our dynamic life-to-life experience. But we do have to deal with it, right? That's the amazing thing about it. And so and that's the role, for example, of scar therapy, of neural therapy, where we inject a scar with procaine ideally, which is now hard to get, unfortunately. So we use lidocaine that can still work, but a little, not as well. We put some homeopathics, and the scar can be 20, 30, 40 years old. And when we inject into it, it gets very red. Not because it gets upset, it releases the inflammation from the inside. And then it will get smaller, 10% smaller, 20% smaller, 80% smaller. But when it gets smaller, it never comes back. And never, literally never. Why? Because we disconnected the ongoing highway from the moment of the trauma to the brain, to the sympathetic system, to the neural pathways that cause this area to contract, to survive. We release it. And when the anesthetic, 45 minutes an hour only, wakes up, the body doesn't remember the pathway. And over time, you can transform scar that has been there for decades. There are, of course, internal scars and internal injuries and endothelial injuries, and with surgery and injuries that causes adhesions. So one of the forms of scarring is adhesions. And next month, our webinar will be on block therapy with Diana Hansen, and I love her work because you stay on one area where there is an adhesion, and you put pressure on it and you breathe, and the adhesion melts, and suddenly your body opens up. That's a physical way of melting the adhesion. So we have multi-generational scars. So I was going to show a diagram here, but we don't have the time, unfortunately. Again, I showed it in the trauma webinar, but we are affected right now by behavioral and traumatic events of our ancestors or earlier in our life They make us react to the present by going back to the past, and they make this scar that is boxed within us. When there's a certain stimulus, the pressure in the scar increases. We're not able to keep it boxed, and it radiates forward in time, and it affects our reaction, right? Somebody hears a small noise, and they hide behind the table because it reminds them of an explosion when they were in the army 20 years ago, or for no reason they can understand, because it's multi-generational for them. So all of these are part of our response. Here, I'll show it to you really quickly because I can't resist. This is really when we are living at the moment, but then we are affected, we are bombarded by issues from the past, from past scars, and we're also bombarded by things from the future. So when we are right here, we are affected, look, by multiple events from the past, that something in the moment triggers them to shoot forward. So when we truly heal this, and these orange lines disappear, these orange lines are going to affect generations that are between us and the origin. So people that we are not aware that they are related to us suddenly go through a transformation. I tell my story, right, in the chapter about surviving, about transforming this, healing the scars of survival. I didn't use the word healing, I don't know why, but in the second edition, I'll correct it when I have time to do it. But that's the multi-generational healing of meditation. But it also will affect our offspring and the future generations. That's the value and the power of such things. So this multi-generation scars, they're really the key ones that drives our life are past traumas. And traumas are not just awful, terrible people, which of course they are, like me not knowing that 10 of the 12 siblings of my grandfather were killed by Hitler. Nobody told us. And I'm named after him. I'm the first child in the next generation. Of course, I never met him. Of course, it's going to affect me. All these issues with his name are dumped into me, right? So this is an example, but it creates a survival response. And it changes our response to external and internal stimulus. And it can run our life. And the way to deal with it, because we need to move on, is to box it. First, we live our life and it pulls us, and then we come back. And at a certain point, it becomes too intense, and we just box it. We don't talk about it. We become unaware of it. And that's a basic stage can develop. So, right, so we are here, and then a past event pulls us back, and then we're able to come back. But if it's too much for us, we create an independent looping, an independent box that has its own life, its own process. And whenever it feels, it will project from the past to now, or we'll go into it, become disconnected from the moment, and it runs our life. So we are full of these patterns again and again and again and again. So this looping can affect, if we are looping at the moment, it will produce compulsive, obsessive, unresolved behavior. And it will create stickiness, right? And the stickiness, what is stickiness? Is holding to things that are changing, that are lighter. It's really a form of grasping. And it will affect the fluid quality of our body, right? It's a phlegm constitution in Chinese medicine or in anthroposophical. Kapha or Bagan in Ayurvedic medicine, in Tibetan medicine. And it's enhanced by certain foods that are very sticky. If you take sugar and you wet it, like real sugar, it becomes sticky. Gluten is very sticky, right? Take bread and wet it, it becomes very sticky. So all of these are sticky. Mold toxins, fungal infections, they are sticky. So there are key medical processes that can help us and sometimes are necessary to really make a change. And the key one that sometimes is necessary, which I specialize is in therapeutic apheresis. Therapeutic apheresis, which is really the focus of my research and work in the last 10 years, is when you take the blood, similar to dialysis, you move it out, you separate the cells from the plasma, and you selectively remove the sticky inflammatory component. In the United States, it's not as available. I mean, in the integrative field, it's really available in doctor's offices, really only in my clinic. But the other alternative that is used often in the US is plasma exchange, where you take the current plasma, you remove it, and you put albumin and electrolytes. You remove everything. You throw the baby with the water. The blood is cleaner. It's used in different autoimmune conditions. And you will produce other things over time. But this is really, we are changing the whole water. In selective apheresis, we are specifically removing these sticky byproducts, and we are allowing the body to recalibrate because the healthy components are there. LDL is removed. Small LDL cholesterol is removed. The good HDL is not removed. Lipoprotein A is removed. C-reactive protein is removed. Fibrinogen, the sticky molecule as a result of inflammation, is removed. Growth factors are removed. Heavy metals are removed. Mycotoxins are removed. And what it happens? It allows the body to recalibrate. So what we are doing, we're removing the byproducts of the survival response. What is my main project? And the reason why I don't now just meditate and teach, it's Eliaz Therapeutics and the development of XGAL3, right? XGAL3, it's a filter that removes just galectin-3, just the upstream survival molecule. And what happened when we remove it in large animals in sepsis? The deadliest process with 80% mortality in 24 hours. What happened? And we are just submitted for publication. What happened? We shut down the whole sepsis in 35 minutes to 45 minutes. Truly miraculous if we can move it in even partial response into the clinic. Why? Because we stopped this process. So it's worthwhile for me to spend my time because 11 million people die from sepsis, hundreds of thousands in the United States. Certain patients with severe enough sepsis in the ICU, 35 to 60% mortality. 2 million sepsis cases just in the US. They are the ones who fill the dialysis rooms afterwards. They are the ones that caused heart failure, that causes organ failure later. So it's just an extreme level of removing what causes the stickiness. And if I get successful enough and I raise the 20 million I need to raise, I'll get it into the clinic and we will show that it works. And it's interesting, I got the top doctors in the field supporting my work because it's so needed. So the last part is transforming the survival paradox. And I can say that I am over time, but I barely lost anyone. So I guess people decided to stay. Okay, I'm glad. So in this sense, we start with the detox process of the mind. There we go. So what happens? Here is the stickiness, right? We talked about the stickiness, thoughts and thought and thought and thought. We are not aware that there is a space between the thought. And then we simply slow down. It's the first level, where we become more mindful, this term that I have a little bit of allergic response to sometimes because it's a very important state, but it's a beginning state. You don't want to get stuck there. You don't want to be mindful of something else because what you are mindful and you, both of them are ever changing. There's no separation. By putting this aside on a simple level, we slow down by slowing our breath, by grounding, by creating spaciousness. The stickiness with diet, the stickiness goes down. And what happened? We detoxify from the unconscious and from the subconscious. We detoxify traumas, emotions, memories, but from our also insights come up. We also connect with different information, with wisdom, because now we're not bound by the conceptual process. And when this comes up, I often say meditation is not what you experience, but your reaction to what you experience. So when this comes to our awareness, we can react by counteracting this, we can react by pushing it away, we can react by detoxifying it. And we talked that the pivotal shift, right, is from detox to transformation, from maintenance to growth and evolution. We move from the head and from the liver as a detox machine, we move to the heart. So the key component is really melting our grasping, melting our holding, melting our fixations. That's the journey. And from a Buddhist perspective, when the Buddha taught the first wheel of the Dharma in Varanasi, he taught the four truths, and the first truth was the truth of suffering. We always experience suffering as part of our existence. Physiologically, it's everything the cell doesn't want. What do we do with the suffering? We get rid of it. We detoxify it, right? And the more tight we are, the more things become suffering and the more this becomes intolerable, right? Muscle activation, right? MCS, this is not good. This is not good for me. It's toxic for me. It causes me pain. It causes me suffering. Let's get rid of it, right? And once we understand the truth of it, that we cannot run away from it, it's part of our existence, there's a quality of relaxation. The reactivity goes down. Because what is muscle activation? It's over reactivity. If I had another 2-3 hours, I would give more information about it. So really the cause is this grasping. And the grasping, the identification, the ego clinging, the identifying with what we input from the external world, what comes to our sensations, is real, is solid, while it's really ever-changing. It has no truth beyond the fact that we see it, hear it, feel it. And identifying with our inner sensation, telling ourselves our own story, this very tight grasping creates polarity between attachment and holding and between aversion. It's toxic for us. And we see it all the way to the cellular level. So letting go of the grasping and fixation is a lifelong journey. It's usually a gradual journey if we go through different meditation, or it's spontaneous. It's spontaneous when somebody introduces us to the magic door, the door when we are open to this oneness, everything falls away. And that's an on-off system. In Tibetan Buddhism, they say the teacher has to introduce you to the nature of your mind. The idea is that many of us experience this for a fraction of a second during our life. We just don't pay attention to it. Somebody who can see when we are there will tell us, this is it. This is it. And then life is never the same. So right now, we are very busy in our life. We are very sticky. So we try to use shortcuts and enhancers that will help us. And that's the flourishing of different psychedelics, right? That shift the biochemical activity of the brain from clinging to more expansion, no matter what it is. And then we get these experiences. Or the use of AI-based apps that can help us. This is going to be the wave of the future. It's coming. But each of us has the capacity to do it on our own. And the advantage when we do it on our own is that it's ours. One of these shortcuts definitely give us inspiration, give us guidance that we may, give us a sign that we may never get on our own. But the issue with it, sometimes the danger with it, is that we don't know how big is the gap between our day-to-day awareness and experience to the induced temporary experience. If the gap is very big, sometimes it's too big to make the journey back home, and we fall in the sidelines. And that's what people that just go semi-crazy with these things, or totally crazy. And not putting the word crazy, but meaning the gap was so big that they can't consolidate it anymore. So we release the grasping through creating openness and through the melting power of love and compassion. And the processes that we discuss are detox and then acceptance. Acceptance is a big shift. Now, why is it so powerful and why it's so easy to connect? Because physiologically, it happens anyway in our heart. You know, I talked about it so many times. I'm not going to repeat myself, but the heart accepts dirty blood from everywhere, right? And there are multiple levels of understanding of acceptance, and which I don't have time to really touch on today. But acceptance, it was what allows for transformation. When we accept, then when the lungs transform by releasing CO2 and getting O2 into the same blood, when we are connected with this, with our mind, with our heart, then the transformation happens. And now the toxins are used as fuel to the fire. The blood, the dirty blood, is necessary to produce clean blood that can nourish the whole body, that will create the coherent electromagnetic field of the heart. So the response to transformation, instead of the reactivity to survival response, which is sympathetic based, the response to transformation, responsiveness, tukje, in Tibetan, is innate and boundless love and compassion. And this is what open heart medicine is about. You know, the vision, the insight that I had was much more esoteric in name and in content and certain teacher from the 14th century. But this I understood after many years, this is a simpler, comprehensive, this is a simpler way that we can understand it and we can connect in with it on a physiological level. And it does have different level. But actually, when I talk about it, even if I talk at the basic level, because of my training, all the levels are already present. It's just a little bit harder to conceive in the beginning. And that's why I'm so excited about the Hawaii retreat, because this whole evolution happened in the last 12, 15 years. And I haven't taught in the US during these years. So for me, I'm bringing open heart medicine for the first time in a person-to-person, in a small group. In Israel, usually it's 200 people. And I'm bringing it into this pure land of acceptance and spaciousness of Hawaii, where I personally spent hundreds, if not over 1,000 days meditating and swimming, and where the insight of open heart medicine happened to me, right there, meditating in the early morning to the ocean, looking at Maui. And the ocean, the ionized air, it allows for this vitalization, it allows for the transformation. And what we do, you can understand why we include certain dietary regimens as much, as possible. We include exercises of different kinds. If it's yoga, breathing, qigong, we include a lot of teaching, a lot of meditation, and hands-on healing, making the adjustments. All of this is really to propel this transformation. So really, transforming the survivor paradox, that's the beginning of my next book, Open Heart Medicine, which I wrote in Hebrew, but I want to write a better one in English. And hopefully it will happen one day in the next few years. But this is really, I took the extra time in a short way. You can appreciate this, each of these topics. I can spend an hour or two and we can experience it. But the idea the idea behind the survivor paradox is that it's not just information. It's really a roadmap to the healing on the most profound level. But it arises out of experience, out of my own contemplative process and meditative experience. It's supported by science. It's based on insight, it's supported by science. But it's not science-based. It's not created because of science. because linear science is linear, it's conceptual. And the innate boundless truth, the innate love and compassion is boundless. It has a quality of equality. Everything is part of it. It's not linear like the regular thinking. So within it, I want to thank all of you for surviving the survival paradox with me, and for participating in this 3-part series. For those who can join me or who are going to join me in Hawaii on September 18th, I'm looking forward to meeting you in person, giving you a big hug. And my prayer is for all suffering to just dissolve and for all beings to find ultimate health and happiness. So thank you, everybody.